You wake up to 537 missed calls. Not messages, not emails, calls. Your phone has been buzzing on your nightstand since 4 in the morning, and you slept through every single one of them because last night was just another shift, a boring, forgettable, nothing happened kind of shift. You reach for your phone the way you always do, half asleep, expecting a text from your mother or a reminder about rent. Instead, your screen is a wall of red notification bubbles, and beneath them, a news alert that makes your stomach drop before your brain even catches up. Your face, on every channel, under the words, "Person of Interest in Global Security Crisis." You don't fire missiles, you don't command armies. You're 26 years old, and your job, your actual, real job, is sitting in a dim server room from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, watching lines of network traffic scroll past on 3 monitors, flagging anything that looks like an intrusion attempt. It's the kind of job people forget exists, the kind of job that exists specifically so nothing bad ever happens. You've never once, in 14 months, done anything that mattered enough to be remembered. Until last night. Last night, a software update pushed through the system without warning, and it broke something. Dozens of alerts flooded your monitor at once, the kind of cascading false positives that happen when a patch doesn't play nice with legacy infrastructure. Your supervisor, a tired man named Marcus, who'd rather be anywhere else at 2 a.m., told you to run a routine test, confirm the emergency notification system still worked. Standard procedure. You'd done it before. You typed the test command the way you always did, selected what you believed was the internal sandbox environment, and pressed send. Except the drop-down menu had changed with the update. The sandbox option had moved, and in your exhaustion, in the specific kind of fog that settles into a brain at 2 in the morning during hour 6 of a night shift, you clicked the option one line above where it used to be. You sent a live warning, not to a test server, to a real military communications network. And by a coincidence that will later feel too perfect to be an accident, the formatting of that warning matched, almost character for character, the protocol used for an actual nuclear launch alert. You didn't know any of this yet. You went home. You slept. You had no idea that 8 time zones away, a foreign radar station had just intercepted your test message at the exact same moment their satellites picked up unrelated military drills along a contested border, drills that had been scheduled for weeks, that had nothing to do with you, that were about to collide with your mistake in the worst possible way. They didn't see a coincidence. They saw confirmation. Within 11 minutes, fighter jets were scrambling from 3 separate air bases. Missile defense systems that had been dormant for a decade blinked awake. Air traffic controllers on 2 continents began grounding civilian flights without explanation, and passengers sat confused on tarmacs while pilots got instructions nobody would repeat over the intercom. You slept through all of it. You woke up to an ordinary alarm, made an ordinary cup of coffee, and thought, at most, that you might get a stern email about a formatting error. Then the soldiers came. Not police, soldiers in full gear, filling the stairwell of your apartment building like they were clearing a war zone. They didn't knock, they didn't explain. Hands grabbed you before you even set down your coffee mug, and within 20 minutes, you were in the back of an unmarked vehicle with a bag over your head, listening to radio chatter you couldn't understand, trying to convince yourself this was some kind of mistake that would sort itself out by lunch. It did not sort itself out by lunch. You were taken underground, literally underground, into a bunker with reinforced concrete walls and a ceiling that hummed with recycled air. Screens lined every wall, and on those screens, world leaders you recognized from textbooks were shouting at each other in translated captions, each one accusing the other of preparing a first strike. Somewhere in that noise, your name started circulating. Not your face yet, just a designation, origin point, signal source. You. And you sat in a plastic chair, unguarded, but somehow more trapped than you'd ever been in your life, watching the planet you woke up in that morning quietly stop existing. Because here's the part nobody tells you about how wars start. It isn't one moment, it's dominoes. Somewhere in a command center you'll never see, an officer with 30 seconds to decide authorized what he called a defensive posture. Somewhere else, that posture looked like the opening move of an attack.
Alliances that had sat dormant since your grandparents were young activated automatically, treaty language triggering troop movements nobody in those rooms had the authority to stop. Countries you couldn't find on a map a week ago were suddenly mobilizing, not because they had any stake in the original message, but because the machine of global defense doesn't ask questions once it starts moving. It only escalates. By that evening, the banks had frozen transactions. By midnight, grocery store shelves in cities you'd never visited sat dark and silent for the first time since anyone could remember. Families you'll never meet packed into basements and subway stations, listening for sirens, flinching at every plane overhead, because somewhere, somehow, the idea had taken hold that the next warning might be real. And it all traced back, thread by thread, satellite log by satellite log, to a workstation with your logging credentials. They found you fast because you never hidden. You didn't even know you needed to. The investigators who finally sat across from you in that bunker didn't want an explanation. They wanted a confession. In their eyes, no ordinary mistake could cause something this large, which meant to them that it couldn't have been a mistake at all. You must have been an asset, a plant, someone recruited, radicalized, or blackmailed into triggering exactly this outcome. You told them the truth, over and over, in the same shaking voice. It was a drop-down menu. It was exhaustion. It was a system update nobody warned you about. Nobody in that room believed a single word of it, because the alternative, that history's most dangerous 48 hours had been caused by one tired 26-year-old clicking the wrong button, was somehow harder to accept than an actual conspiracy. Then your name leaked. Not the classified version, the public one. Full name, photo, hometown, employer, all of it spilled across every platform within hours by hackers who claimed they were exposing a traitor. And the world did what the world does. It picked a side before it had a single fact. Half the planet called you the most dangerous person alive, the woman or man, whichever you pictured, who nearly ended civilization out of malice or incompetence. It didn't matter which to them. The outcome was the same. The other half decided you were a fall guy, a name assigned to a crisis too big and too embarrassing for anyone powerful to actually own. You didn't know which side scared you more. Somewhere in the chaos, you slipped out of custody, not through some clever escape, but because in a building full of people fighting over which government got to interrogate you first, nobody was actually watching the door. You ran because staying meant becoming a symbol for people who'd already decided what you were. And it was during those hours underground, moving between safe houses that weren't really safe houses, that you found the file. It was buried in a maintenance log from the software company that had pushed the update to your systems 3 days before your shift. A log that shouldn't have existed, on a server that shouldn't have been accessible, showing that the update hadn't failed by accident. Someone had altered it deliberately. Someone had moved that drop-down option on purpose, timed to a specific shift on a specific night, targeting a junior analyst whose access level was just high enough to reach a live network and just low enough that nobody would think to question their judgment. You weren't the cause. You were the tool. Chosen, not random. Somewhere, a group with no flag and no name wanted 2 nuclear powers to stare down the barrel of mutual destruction, and they needed a human being simple enough, tired enough, and forgettable enough to pull the trigger without ever knowing they'd done it.
You were that person, and now you were the only one who could prove it. But proof, in a moment like this, isn't safety, it's a target. Every government that had spent the last 2 days hunting you for vengeance now wanted that file for an entirely different reason. To control the narrative, to bury the embarrassment, to make sure the story the public heard was the one that kept them in power. You had maybe hours before cities you'd never visited began final preparations for strikes that could not be recalled. Hours before some commander somewhere decided the silence had gone on long enough and made the call that couldn't be unmade. You had one decision left and no time to make it carefully. You could hand the file to a government, any government, and trust that they'd use it to stop the war instead of using it to win one, or you could do the one thing no official on any screen wanted you to do. You could give it to everyone, all at once, before anyone had the chance to bury it. You chose the second one. You uploaded it from a library computer in a city that still had electricity, watched the progress bar crawl toward 100% with your hands shaking so badly you could barely type the caption, and hit send one final time. This time on purpose. This time knowing exactly what it would do. The file spread faster than any government could contain it, faster than the panic that had started this whole thing. Somewhere in a command center with a red phone and a launch key already turned halfway, a commander read the leaked evidence scrolling across a secondary monitor and, for reasons that will never be fully explained to the public, paused. Just paused. Long enough for someone above him to see it too. Long enough for the countdown that had been running quietly in the background of the entire planet's last 48 hours to stop, with what analysts would later estimate at less than 4 minutes to spare. The war that almost happened never fully happened, but peace, once you've watched it come this close to ending, never quite goes back to what it was. Alliances that cracked that week never fully repaired. Trust between nations that had spent decades pretending to trust each other, quietly, permanently thinned. Something was lost in those 48 hours that no ceasefire could give back. And you, history, when it got around to writing itself, didn't remember the shadow group, didn't remember the altered update, the maintenance logs, the conspiracy sitting underneath the whole disaster like a rotten foundation. Governments buried that part quietly, the way governments bury the parts that make them look weak. What survived, what got printed in textbooks and argued about in classrooms decades later, was simpler than the truth. One name, yours, attached forever to the 2 days the world almost ended. Some historians call you the closest the planet ever came to annihilation. Others call you the person who, faced with a choice between hiding and exposing everything, chose the version of the truth that actually saved billions of lives. You still don't know which one of them is right. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of your mind you never fully turn off, you wonder if the world will ever agree, or if you'll spend the rest of your life being both the villain and the reason there's still a world left to call you one.